Good. Okay. Well, Access Pueblo is actually a Zuni Pueblo. It's located south of Gallup near the New Mexico-Arizona state line. It's right at the edge of the Zuni Reservation, and it is on private land. Uh, I should say that about 15% of the site is within the existing Zuni Reservation boundary. The rest of it was on a private ranch. Uh, the site was first noted by Bandelier in 1892, described by Leslie Spear in 1917. This is an 1,100 room masonry pueblo with a 92-foot diameter Great Kiva, and much of the pueblo was two-story. The dates for the pueblo are 1260 to 1285. And these dates are really interesting as far as I'm concerned, because can you imagine the amount of effort it would have taken for a community to build an elaborate pueblo? And that's exactly what these people did. However, they only lived there for 25 years. And we don't know the full story. We don't know what caused them to move, but it does add an interesting dimension to this particular pueblo. Here you see the pueblo within the circle, and it's surrounded by these two sandstone uplifts, and this is where most of the construction material for the pueblo came from. And if you look in this aerial photo right here, there is a long black trench. Unfortunately, that is a backhoe trench, and that is one of the illustrations of some of the damage that was done to Box S prior to the Conservancy acquiring it. So here's one of the sandstone walls. Extensive damage was done by power equipment in the 1970s. I first saw the Pueblo in 1973 with Mike Marshall, when we were both working for School of American Research in Santa Fe. And we saw the Pueblo right after the damage had been done. 110 rooms had been cleaned out using power equipment. Some of the shafts were the size of a Pueblo room, about 3 meters and 5 meters deep. All of this damage was done before the passage of the New Mexico Burial Protection Law. The owner's actions were not illegal. So the land at that point was owned by a group of developers. They had bought the Box S Ranch, and they intended to cut it into quarter-acre lots and sell it off to the public. And unfortunately, one of the partners was a looter. And so he took this opportunity to clean out 110 rooms at Box S. And so in 1989, we got a letter from the Conservancy, got a letter from Governor Lewis. And he was begging us to come over to Zuni and buy this from the existing owners. And so that began a 10-year period of discussion with the owners. It did take a long time because very high expectations of making a killing off this particular development project. So finally, in 1999, the Conservancy entered into an agreement to purchase 160 acres for $88,500. We didn't have the money, and we had to enter into a one-year option. That gave us time to put together a proposal, and we started fundraising. A new New Mexico subdivision law actually helped the owners' decision to sell the 160 acres. The new subdivision law, enacted in 1999, actually said that owners, developers who sell lots within a subdivision to the public can no longer just split them up and sell them off without any infrastructure. The new law stated that developers had to put in infrastructure to make the subdivision viable. Things like a water system, good roads, and an electrical grid were required. And so all of this busted the budget of the developers who owned Box S. And they decided that maybe it would be time to talk to the Conservancy about this. We knew that we had some major problems in front of us. We had to backfill these rooms. Anytime you have a pueblo that has isolated shafts of looted rooms in it, you're running a real risk of losing additional data. Because if you don't fill those shafts with dirt, then it's going to be necessary, or what may happen is that the adjacent rooms may collapse into the void and actually corrupt the archaeological material that's in the unexcavated adjacent rooms. We knew that we had much more work to do in order to make this viable. So we put together, and the plan was a funding package that included not only acquisition of the property, but mapping, because the site had never been adequately mapped, backfilling, fencing, reseeding, and the development of a bank. So we circulated that plan, and one day I got a very interesting call from Patrick Lannon. And Patrick Lannon runs the Lannon Foundation in Santa Fe. Jim, I got your proposal. I think it's a great proposal. It's a wonderful idea. We can't give you the money. And I thought to myself, well, Patrick, you could have just written me a letter and said you couldn't give me the money. But actually, Patrick had something else in mind. Patrick had a plan, and he outlined his plan to me, and he said, we can give the money to the Zunis. So if we gave you the full amount of money you're requesting in your package for acquisition, for mapping, backfilling, fencing, reseeding, and development of a management plan, would you be willing to turn title of this 160 acres over to the Zunis once all those tasks had been completed? So I thought it sounded like an interesting development. I took the plan to our board of directors, and the board said, you know, that's a great idea. And so what then happened was an amazing collaboration project with Zuni Pueblo. And it's interesting because Zuni Pueblo has a lot of resources. They have their own archaeology department. They have a lot of volunteers, and they have a lot of equipment. And so we worked out with Zuni a way to enact this plan that Patrick Lannon had come up with. And so in this picture, you can see one of our first joint visits to the site with the Zunis. I'm the person on the far left holding the black gloves. And to the right of me is Jonathan Damp. Jonathan Damp was the director of the Zuni Cultural Resource Project. And then the two individuals to the right of Jonathan are Zuni tribal council members. So we decided we'd get cracking. We formed an alliance, we came up with an agreement, and we started to work on it together. So one of the first steps was mapping. And unfortunately, the Pueblo, even though it had been discovered way back in the 1800s, had never been professionally mapped. And so we used a total station. And this is an example of a total station. Very sophisticated computer that uses a laser beam that can make very accurate maps very quickly. And so this is actually Dave Thomas with the American Museum of Natural History in New York. He's using a total station on another conservancy preserve, San Marcos Pueblo. We knew we needed a lot of dirt. And it's important whenever you backfill an archaeological site that you do it with dirt that doesn't contain any cultural resources, just so you don't confuse future archaeologists. And so we had a big enough piece of land. We were able to take a bulldozer and a front end loader, and we were able to use dump trucks to stage the dirt close enough to Box S to have it transported to the site. And so here we are digging a pit. We actually made a stock pond in digging the pit. And we had an archaeologist at the site watching every shovelful of dirt that came out of the pit to make sure that it did not have any cultural resources in it at all. And the backfill, daunting job. We backfilled 1,800 cubic yards of fill, and that's the equivalent of 180 dump trucks. So we have done backfilling projects at least 10 conservancy preserves in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. This was one of the biggest projects that we ever embarked upon. It was necessary for us to put in some ramps, which would allow us to drive heavy equipment up to the room blocks of Box S. And we use lightweight 4x4 backhoes, not only to clear the brush, but also to build the dirt ramps. And the dirt ramps were really necessary so we wouldn't crush and disturb deposits could potentially be damaged by driving heavy equipment over them. I want you to notice in this picture, do you see the gentleman with the shovel on the left? He is one of the volunteers that came out from Zuni Pueblo. And you'll notice he's wearing an orange jumpsuit. Well, own penal system, and they had a number of trustees, not people who were really incarcerated for horrible crimes like murder, but people who were in there for misdemeanors and smaller offenses. And they allowed these men to come out and volunteer to help us. And boy, were they a big help. To begin with, they were happy to be outside. And they were very enthusiastic and really did a good job. At one point in the project, Jonathan Damp and I were on one side of the Pueblo, and the work crew was on the other side of the Pueblo, and we needed them to come over. And so Jonathan, at the top of his lungs, goes across the site. He says, "Hey, you Carrot Clan guys, get over here. We need you." And I was appalled. I said, "Jonathan, what are you saying?" I explained to him that I thought that he had really pulled a faux pas by calling them that name. And Jonathan said, "You know, that's the name they call themselves." Wonderful people. Really great to be around. It was necessary to clear the vegetation in some of the rooms before we actually started adding dirt. So after putting the ramps in place, which is what you see in this picture, we set about clearing any vegetation that had regrown inside the rooms. Necessary to get that out before we start adding dirt. Necessary step is to put a barrier between the bottom of the room. And for this, we use geotextile material. This is something they use an awful lot in road construction. The geotextile material is ideal for this because it's pin punched, it's a woven fabric, and it allows water to move up and down. in the room. Very important for preserving some of the artifacts that are especially underneath the geotextile. Archaeologists used to use black plastic, which of course was not permeable. And we discovered in the profession that this is really a mistake. Geotextile material comes on big rolls like carpeting. It's easy to cut with a pair of scissors, and it's relatively inexpensive. So here is one of those long backhoe trenches being prepared with geotextile material to receive dirt. This is what a room looks like when it's ready to be filled with fill dirt. So our step, just to make sure we wouldn't confuse any future archaeologists, especially if for some reason all the paper records were gone. And that is, we created this high-fired clay tile, and we put some information on it. Our logo, in the words Archaeological Conservancy, backfilled AD 2000. So in the bottom of every pit, every room, every trench at Box S, one of these tiles. Filling the room up with fill dirt, and we filled all of these rooms up to the top. It was necessary to get in and do some hand shoveling to spread the dirt around and make sure that it was evenly distributed and covered the edge of the geotextile material. So the next couple of slides illustrates a technique that we used in a few places at Box S. We wanted to make sure that if someone visited Box S, they'd be able to see something. And so we decided that in some cases, we would leave a few architectural details visible. You can see these are 4 rooms, and you see a doorway there. This is the before picture. This is after backfilling, and as you can see, we left just a little bit for visitors to see and backfill the rest of the rooms. We did all of this backfilling in the summer of 2000, and we decided when we were all through that we really needed to celebrate what we had done together. And so we invited some conservancy members out. We invited a number of Zuni Pueblo people out, and we had a celebration at the site. We gave tours of the site. The Zuni women cooked up a feast for everyone. We had it under a tent. Dancers performed for the group. Very impressive. And most importantly, Zuni Governor Bawadaki spoke to tribal members in Zuni. And he turned to the entire group, and here's what he said. He said, "This place represents the past, but for us, living, many important people are buried here, and we turn to them when we need them." So this absolutely one of the best projects I have ever worked on in my 39 years of working with the Conservancy. And now Zuni Pueblo is in a much better place. The damage has been repaired, and it is now owned and protected by the Pueblo of Zuni. So thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you listening to our presentation. And now I'm going to read any questions and hopefully answer them that people may have had. So let me drop out of this. and see if we have any questions. I I don't see questions. Do any of the other participants see questions? Oh, yes,
We
they're
do.
popping up.
There we go.
They're popping up. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I have a question from Harold, and it says, "What was learned about the inhabitants of Box S?" Um, you know, we didn't learn a great deal about the inhabitants of Box S because none of the actions that took place in our backfilling project included excavation. And really, the only excavations that have ever been done at Box S have been done by looters, unfortunately. And, archaeologists look for information, looters look for artifacts. And so we still don't know what we really need to know about the inhabitants of Box S, except that they are clearly ancestral Zuni, and that's based on artifacts. So the next question I have is from Carla. And the question is, did any artifacts remain or were they all looted? Well, there were artifacts on the surface. We did no surface collecting of artifacts in the process of doing this. The rest of the artifacts, as far as we know, were looted and taken away from the site. And so where those are, we're not really sure. But I must say that if you think about it, 110 rooms out of 1,100, that means that 10% of the site has been impacted. And so there are tens of thousands of artifacts at Boxes Pueblo. They're safely in the ground and safely being guarded by the Zuni right where they belong. And so the information that we'll find out about Boxes and the artifacts that we'll be able to see at some point will be something that we'll see in the future. So next, Alfonso says, has the site been mapped? Yes, that was our first goal, was to map the site. And actually the Zuni Cultural Resource Enterprise, this is Jonathan's division of Zuni government, was the entity that mapped the site for us. Second question, were the looted artifacts ever recovered or returned to the Zuni people? This is from Jane. No. To the best of my knowledge, the artifacts have never been recovered and they've never been returned. And we don't really know where they are. Please, next question is from Scott. And it's, please say again what the survey equipment was and how that's different from other equipment. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. That's from Ted. Ted asked that question. Ted, that is a total station. And a total station consists of a machine that generates a laser that hits a target. And the idea is that you set up the total station at your datum. You then send someone out on a point that you want to map on the site itself with a target. And you send the laser out to the target. What the machine measures is the bearing and distance from the machine to the target. And it stores all of those points in a memory. And then you can take it back to the office, and if the gods are willing, you can put it into your computer. It will generate a very fine-tuned, perfect map of the site. Because the other thing that the machine is measuring is differences in elevation from the datum itself. And so the site map comes out as a beautiful contour map of the entire site, and it has all of these points in, and presumably the points would be the corners of the rooms or whatever you wanted to map. And let me see, here's Scott's question. Thanks for this great talk, Jim. Do you have an idea of what role Box S plays for the Zuni now, or to what extent they are in active interaction with it? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading these things wrong. Scott's statement was a private statement to me, and so I can't read it right now. That was from Shannon. And so what role does Box S play for the Zuni now, or to what extent are they in active interaction? I believe that they are in very active interaction with this site. The Zunis, for the Zunis, their ancestors are very important. And so if they have problems, they go consult with their ancestors. And so I believe that the main interaction that's taking place here is people talking to their ancestors. And next is, I believe, from Frank. Is the site open to visitors? There are a number of archaeological sites on the Zuni Reservation. This is one of them. Another one is Hawaku. And there are many other sacred places. And the village of the Great Kievis is another one. And it just depends on who wants to see it and why. And it is up to the Zunis to say yes or no to any request to visit a site. Times when I've wanted to take groups to the other sites, and I've gotten permission. And there have been other times when I've wanted to take groups to some of the other sites on the Zuni Reservation, and I've been turned down. And so it is, after all, it's their property, it's their responsibility to preserve and protect it. And so they sort of set the rules. And so it is not open to visitors, but if you have a reason to go there, you may make a request. Sometimes the requests are granted, sometimes they're not. And the next question is, and I can't tell who this is from, so I'll just repeat the question and answer it. If you know who the looter is, can you backtrack through his family to see if the artifacts are being held by the family? I have a pretty good idea who the looter is. We've not taken those steps, but I assume it would be possible. And it may be something that we might consider. Since the site no longer belongs to us, I would need to bring that up to the Zunis and say, would you like to do this? I'd be happy to bring that topic up and see if there's any response. The next question is, let me see. Have there been any efforts to contact the looters or amateur archaeologists about the artifacts or information about the Pueblo? Could a relationship be established to gain more insight? Thank you for the program. Again, the same answer that I had for the last question would apply to this one. And that is, that's something I could bring up with the Zunis. It would be their decision to decide what to do. I do believe that a relationship could be established to gain more insight. Did you take pictures of the artifacts? No. Since some of the artifacts were obviously from a burial context, the Zunis requested that we not take pictures. And so we honored that request and did not. We did take extensive pictures, before and after pictures, of the rooms and their condition. Next question is, are there any local legends and explanations as to where the people came from and went to? Do any of the Zuni claim descent from them? Also, are these ruins flat and not on a... Also, these ruins are flat and not on a hillside. Why? Well, let me begin with the second question. It's certainly easier to build a pueblo on land that's flat. They were down in a valley, and they were close to a stream. And so both of these things would be the best place to build a pueblo. The construction of this pueblo doesn't look defensive. If you were building a defensive pueblo, you might have wanted to put it at the top of the hill instead of in the valley. And then the other question, local legends and or explanations as to where the people came from and where they went. Well, I know where they went because they're still there. And the Zunis still live not far from where Box S is located. The Zunis have about a 723 square mile reservation. Most of it is in New Mexico. And if you look at Zuni origin myths, or beliefs, I shouldn't say myths, beliefs, they believe that they emerged from an area somewhere in the neighborhood of the Grand Canyon. They then migrated to southeastern Arizona, and they developed a number of settlements along the Little Colorado River, which sort of flows out of southeastern Arizona, and it parallels the Arizona-New Mexico line. And, the Conservancy owns at least 9 proto-Zuni or ancestral Zuni pueblos that we've established as archaeological preserves, including Box S. Many of those are on the Little Colorado River and in eastern New Mexico, near Springerville, in eastern Arizona, near Springerville, and all the way up as far north as Snowflake. So we believe that the Zuni were in this area. And if you look at another part of Zuni history, you realize that the Coronado men encountered the Zuni in 1680 when they were the first European visitors into the Southwest. And they encountered them and had a huge battle at Hawaku. And Hawaku is not that far from Box S, and it's very close to Zuni Pueblo, where people live today. And so we believe that we know a lot about where the Zuni came from. We certainly know a lot about where they are now because they're still there. So let's see. Did the Pueblo have a defensive wall of any kind? One was not noted. I'll put it that way. But I think that you would need to have a more extensive excavation project. Again, there's really never been any professional excavation done at Box S Pueblo. Someone is asking about an earlier land scandal that involved this Pueblo. And supposedly Zuni tried to get the land and a surveyor tricked them So they got a piece of land without the site. Have I heard of this? No, I've never heard of that. I'd be very interested in knowing more about it. Never heard of that story. What plans, if any, do the Zuni have for future excavation at the site, given that human burials are there? I suspect not. Well, it's interesting because we thought about this long and hard and had discussions in board meetings about it. And we decided that we had to leave the Zunis with a management plan. And part of that management plan would be to talk about excavation, because all of our management plans talk about excavation. And so in the management plan itself that we developed jointly with the Zunis, there are procedures and rules for people to make requests for permits to excavate at Box S. And finally, in the management plan, we said that the final decision would be up to the governor and tribal council. And so there is a mechanism for excavation at Zuni. And what I find is that among the Zuni and their brothers, the Hopi, the whole idea about should sites be excavated or should they not is a site that is an attitude, is a belief that can change through time. And you really see sometimes you'll get a very conservative group of leaders in the leadership of the Pueblo, and they'll say, oh no, it should never be done. And other times you'll get more liberal leaders. They'll say, well, I think we need to find out about our past. So if we made mistakes in the past, we need to know about them so we don't repeat them. And I believe that it's possible that it could be done. The important thing is what we've preserved at Box S is not just the site. We've preserved the possibility for it to be excavated under controlled conditions in the future. And so we've preserved the information that is still there in the site, and it's now in a state where it won't be eroded away. So let's see. How do you know the dates of the site? Well, that's an easy one. We have adjacent sites that have been excavated by archaeologists where we have dates that have been determined by either archaeomagnetism or by other forms of dating, dendrochronology. And we know the dates of this site based on pottery on the ground. And so pottery changes through time. Various types of pottery are more popular and then lose favor. And so we can usually put very narrow time windows on types of pottery. And so based on the pottery that's on the surface of the site, that's how we're coming up with the dates for the site. Have the Zuni reconsecrated the site? If so, what was the ceremony? And have they told you? Actually, I don't know. If it has, I'm sure it's been reconsecrated, but they did not consult us about that. People are asking if the Conservancy has collaborated with Zuni Pueblo on other projects. Also, can you share how the Pueblo got its name, Box S? Well, the Box S name was a ranch. It was a cattle ranch for ages. And so that's where the name came from. That was their brand, Box S, Box S Ranch. So have we collaborated on the Zuni Pueblo on other projects? Yes, we have. The most notable recent project was Amity Pueblo in southeastern Arizona near Springerville. We worked very closely with council, with religious leaders on that particular site. That site was donated to us by the Arizona Game and Fish. Arizona Game and Fish had decided at one point to build a fishing pond on a piece of land they own near Springerville, and they uncovered a pueblo. And it's a very sad story, but by the end of the process, not only were they punished heavily by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation and other, the Governor's Advisory Council on Archaeology in Arizona, and censured by the Society for American Archaeology, but they decided they never wanted to own that land again anymore. So it was determined that they would transfer that land to the Conservancy. And so we supervised the repair of the damage to that particular site, and that is now an active Conservancy preserve. And the next one. Are those identification tiles the ones to be developed by Tion Joseph? Is there a story behind them? Yes. Tion is our business manager and has been for many, many years. She also has as a hobby ceramics. And so she did develop the idea with us, and the first ones were made by Tion. She no longer has her kiln, and so we have them made in Albuquerque. There's a place that fires them for us for new projects, because we have to change the date all the time. Under the Repatriation Act, let's see, would that not be possible? I'm not sure how to answer that. So the Repatriation Act really deals with, NAGPRA really deals with the repatriation of burials and burial goods. And so not all artifacts found at archaeological sites, I think this is the answer you're looking for. Not all artifacts that are found at archaeological sites actually are associated with burials. And so not all artifacts are subject to NAGPRA. Oh, and the next one is just a nice comment. It's very nice. It says, this may be a unique example of a number of factors coming together to achieve what might be the ultimate best situation for the Zuni people. This is why the Archaeological Conservancy is such an important organization. Thank you. And so, thank you. And that was from Mary Mosier. So thank you very much. Excuse me if this was covered, but did the looting take place only on a portion of land privately owned, or did the looters spoil the portions on the Zuni land? No, the looters in the 70s did not cross the fence line. They knew better than to cross the fence line. So all of the 1970s damage was done on the land owned by the developers. And then April is saying, thank you for all your questions. Jim will try to get to as many as you can. So April, you'll have to signal me when I've gone too far. Otherwise, I'll keep on going.
Well, we can probably take just a few more. We're about 3 minutes away from our hour. So.
Oh, okay. Let me take a couple more. Are the Zuni receptive to more investigations at the site, and is TAC seeking a university proposal? Again, that mechanism was left in place when the Zuni adopted the management plan. And so it's entirely possible that may happen at some point in the future. We are not seeking a university proposal right now because, for one thing, we don't own the land. But I'm sure that if a university was interested, they certainly might come forward. Another nice comment. it's thank you for an interesting presentation. I think you should approach the Zuni about tracking down the looted artifacts through the looter's family. We would be interested to read about the results if it happens in the Conservancy Journal. All right, I'll pursue it. This is from Jennifer. I've been reading about research at Arroyo Hondo Pueblo. Was wondering whether there is evidence of scarlet macaws at Zuni, Box S, or other sites as there are in Arroyo Hondo. We do find evidence of scarlet macaws across the Southwest. And we believe that probably they were raising scarlet macaws in aviaries in Nuevo Casas Grandes at Paquime in northern Mexico and trading them in the Southwest. And so, yes, other scarlet macaws have been found. To the best of my knowledge, none have been found at Box S. I'm not sure about other Zuni sites, but yes, scarlet macaws are fairly common in the Pueblo world. Idea why they left after 25 years? I don't know. I would think that if you had a pretty good handle on the climate, that would be my first guess. It's hard to say. It would really take a good excavation program. And then the final question, we'll go ahead and end it here, and that is, was the property actually added to the reservation, or does the tribe hold it separate from the reservation? And we have two different types of land on Indian reservations. One is trust land, where the land is held in trust by the federal government and offered for the benefit of the tribe. Other types of land are lands that are actually held by the tribe as an enterprise. And I believe that the land is still held by the Zuni as an enterprise, and so they hold it themselves. They have several other pieces of land. They've bought ranches in Arizona to provide more economic opportunities for the people who live at Zuni. And I don't believe they would have turned this piece of property over to be managed as trust land. So I'll stop there, and thank you so much for sitting. And I do want to thank you for your continued support. We can't do this without you. So thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you, everyone.